Hi guys, so today we're going to be printing our beautiful stencil. So what we're going to need is one A4 piece of drawing paper. We're going to need a stencil, a palette with some black acrylic paint and a sponge or a stippling paintbrush. Now what we're going to do first of all is make sure that with one hand we're holding the stencil and the paper in place. With the other we're going to be dabbing that onto the black acrylic paint, and with an up-down stippling motion we are going to be dabbing the black acrylic paint into the gaps of our stencil. Now I'm being really careful here about the amount of paint that I'm using. We need to make sure that we're not using too much paint because it can create what we call bleeding. Now bleeding is where, in this particular technique, is where the paint seeps underneath the stencil and makes our lines quite inaccurate and blurry. We want our lines to be super sharp and neat, and the way we do that is to make sure that we're moving our hand up and down and not side to side, and we are using the appropriate amount of paint. Now we're almost at completion, so we're going to lift the stencil in a second and reveal what's underneath. Voila! So you can see, looking closely, there's some areas that we might need to go back into to make sure that there is an even coat. So when I position the stencil next to the print itself, you can see how that translates. Now for my initial stencil attempt I used a blank piece of paper. Now I'm going to move on, now I'm more confident, to my BLM collage. Now what I'm going to do is exactly the same process, repeat that again, but making sure again this time that I hold it really firmly in place. So now I'm just double checking that I'm happy with the coat, making sure that the application of the paint is consistent across all areas. And then very gently I'm going to lift that stencil away from the collage to reveal the print below. And voila. So to wrap up guys, consider these teacher tips. Think really carefully about an up-down stippling motion and not a side to side when using your sponge and applying the paint, and making sure that you've got the appropriate amount of paint to make sure that there is no bleeding, but there is enough to make sure there's a consistent application of paint across the entire stencil. Good luck.